Hey, folks, welcome to the program. This is the pre show to the program. So, if you are here for the first time, um, that's the way we do things. This is the unofficial part of the program. We're just getting set up still and making sure everything works and everything is on. And it looks like my sound is up. Testes 1, 2, testes 3, 4. I think it's working. And make sure my lights are right and all the junk is right and all the hoo-ha is in the doodad and the bling bling and the blah blah. Hey, Morgan Snow, happy Friday. Good to see you. And we've got about 2 minutes left before we go live on the radio network. Matthew Sainsbury, good to see you. All the way from Barbados. Is it you getting snow out there? Probably not. It's interesting. I don't smoke anymore. I haven't smoked in 6 months. But this sweater, which has been laundered at least once a week or every 2 weeks in that 6 months, smells like cigarette smoke today. I've got it on and it smells like cigarette smoke. I don't know what that's from. That's odd. So we got about 1 minute and 20 seconds. We go live. How's everybody's Friday night? Happy Friday night. For all of those of you who are here, I see you that you're here, just not that you're in the chat room. So I hope you're doing well. Come on in the chat room if you want to talk. If you are over on Facebook, you can chat from over there when you chat in the channel, but it's not usually seen here, and you can't see what everybody else is saying. It's just a Facebook only thing. So when we're broadcasting over there, you're not really in the main chat. Come on over to the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And you'll find the show and the channel. So come on over there if you're sitting in Facebook. All right, we've got about what? I got to put on my glasses. We've got about 20 seconds and we go live over on the radio station. About 12 seconds. We're going to go dark. Everybody sit tight. We'll be right back.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. I am your host, Scotty Roberts, of this here, my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And you can just go to Odyssey Radio at ODYSY radio.com. Hear this show in its audio format. You can check back later. This show will be archived at several times throughout the week, and you can hear, or at least the next day or two. And you can hear it until the next new show comes up and is in archive. So happy Friday night. Hope you've had a good week so far, and that everything's going well for you. If you are sitting over on any of the other channels other than the YouTube channel, other sources, I should say, and you want to join the chat room, come on over to my YouTube channel, and you can see the live simulcast in video. And also join the chat room, which is where all the Intrepids hang out during the show. And you can come over and chat over there. You can chat from Facebook and from Twitter, X, and some of the other places, but even on the Patreon site. However, the best chat, where everybody's going to see you and you're going to see everybody else, is going to be over at youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. Welcome to everybody who's here. just a few of you in the chat room right now. Claudette, good to see you. And Matthew Sainsbury from Barbados, good to see you. And Morgan Snow is here. And many others who are not in the chat room yet. So I can't say hi to you. When you come in, if I see you, I'll say hello. So good to have you here live for today's show. And it was Kelly Bell Moran that asked me last week or earlier this week, are you live? And you know what? Yes, this show is always produced live. And if we're ever going to do a pre-record, it's only because we'd warn you ahead of time and say, hey, we had to pre-record this, but I'll always show up live in the chat room so I can chat alongside what's ever going on. We used to do a lot more pre-records than we do now. I like going live. It's kind of nice. Only thing about doing a pre-recorded show, you can edit in all the sounds, you can edit the flow of everything, and you have your fade ins and your fade outs and all of that. And it's kind of fun that way. It looks more slick. But this is all right. This is live. I'm going to take down tonight's banner. The Exodus, was it an actual historical event that can be dated? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And, on that particular topic, that is, as most of you know, that is a pet topic of mine. I enjoy talking about it. And when I come across newer information that's out there or newer scholars presenting information, I like to talk about those things. I think it's good to refresh our minds on some of this. Now, the first question I would have to ask you, or you would have to ask yourself, is why do I need to hear about the Exodus? You could say you might not be Christian, you might not be Jewish. Are you a student of history? This stuff is historical. I know there are people out there that want to make claims that, I put my show banners up now. There we are. That all of this information that we get on the Exodus and so on is mythological. It's only mythological. That it has no source point in anything historical. And if it does, that historical source point is one that is so far removed from the story that we know that we can chalk it all up to mythology and storytelling. And there are some things that I wonder about with that. I wonder if there are stories that get told and that we repeat those stories. And they've been repeated so many times, they become, in a sense, like religious fairy tales. But there is a lot of information about the Exodus, about the people involved in the Exodus, that rings true to history. There is no direct historical account other than, say, the biblical texts themselves. You can look at the biblical text and ask yourself, is that a historical text? Well, yeah, it was something written a very long time ago. Just because it was religious doesn't mean that it was a falsified story. It might mean that it's laced with religious context. It might mean that it's an historical account that's wrapped around a theological account. We've seen an awful lot of that. It's like asking, was Gilgamesh a real person in the Sumerian culture? Was Moses a real person? I don't think there's any reason to doubt that he was. There is a history of Israel, and he was part of their early history. I think Moses is the kind of character in the early history of Israel as you would have. Who can you think of in American history that Of course, we have a lot more written history about him, but George Washington, people like that. These were all people that were part of history, and they were part of ancient stories, if you will, of American history, the founding of America, and so on. And so Moses, I think, was a real person. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that. Herodotus was a real person. Homer, who wrote the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey, he was a real person. Plato was a real person. All of these ancient figures were real people. But I think they get ascribed this mythological context or this, oh, it's just Moses, it's just a Bible story, we don't even know if he existed. We ask those questions because he's written stories that are all about religious history and about a religion, the founding of a religion. And so all of that, you've got to start thinking and say, just because he wrote and founded and codified Judaism, why does that mean he has to be a mythological character? Well, just because there's no real historical data for him. Why do we want that to be something? All right, come here. Don't be all disappointed. All right, my kid wants to come in during radio, which she knows she's not supposed to do, but she coming in anyway. What's important? What do you got to share?
Hi.
Oh, you got helium going?
Yeah.
I should try some of that. I should broadcast with a helium balloon, huh?
Hi.
Maybe that would. Here, where's the opening here? Oh, it's raining
Right
fast.
there.
Okay. Oh well, I gotta find it.
It's right there.
Let's see.
Don't take it all.
Okay, we're going to broadcast like this now for the rest of the night. The Exodus is a real place. It's a real thing. It's a real event in history. All you have to do is start thinking. There, it's starting to dissipate. And I'm a little dizzy off of that. Are you supposed to get dizzy off of helium? Maybe because it takes the place of oxygen. So, oh, Mom said it makes you retarded. So, oh well, we'll see what happens. All right. So that was a familiar interlude for tonight. A familial interlude for tonight, where the child comes in and makes her presence known. And thanks for the helium. She's gone. And so anyway, I forgot where I was, but the whole idea of Moses being a fictional character is nonsense. I was talking about the historical efficacy of Moses. You may not find a lot about Moses in history, but the fact that he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible is an historical record. It's something that he wrote saying, well, now we got to have proof that he was the one who actually wrote it. I think Professor Bauer brought up the other night. So one of the arguments is, well, he certainly didn't write about his own death. So that has something to say. Well, not necessarily. Moses could have written the book of, he wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy, we have his death. Well, did Moses write about his death? Well, of course not. But do you think that maybe the next leader, who was Joshua, may have said, well, Moses left this portion of his writings undone. I need to add in there that this is where he died. And Moses died at this point. And as a matter of fact, you can look it up at the end of Deuteronomy. Let's see if I've even just got a Bible sitting right here. Hang on. Let's take a look. Yes. It's an old Bible of mine from back. I had this Bible when I was in seminary. And it's an NIV, a New International Version, study Bible. But at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, which is the last of the 5 books of Moses, let's see what it says about his death. So we dig in here. I don't remember how many chapters long Deuteronomy is. And of course, right after that is the book of Joshua. Joshua, the son of Nun, who took over the leadership of Israel when Moses died. Let's see what it says. At the end, here it is, chapter 34 of Deuteronomy, the death of Moses. All right, it's right here. First, the chapter 33, right before that, it's got the Song of Moses. That goes the entire chapter 32. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain, and my words descend like dew, and so on and so on. And that goes all the way through to almost the end of chapter 33. And then it says at the end of 33, it's right after the Song of Moses. It says, Moses came with Joshua, the son of Nun, and spoke, as N-U-N, and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people. When Moses finished reciting all these words to all of Israel, he said to them, take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared to you this day, so that you may command your children to obey carefully all the words of this law. They are not just idle words for you, they are your life. By them you will live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. That's what Moses said. And then it says, on that same day, the Lord told Moses, go up to Abarim range, go up to the Abarim range to Mount Nebo in Moab, cross from Jericho, and view Canaan, the land I am giving the Israelites as their own possession. There on the mountain that you have climbed, you will die and be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. This is because both of you broke faith with me, says God. In the presence of the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin, and because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites, therefore you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving to the people of Israel. And then it goes on in chapter 33. This is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, pronounced on Israelites before his death. And he gives a blessing. It's written like a poem. And this goes all the way to the end of chapter 33. And it says, the end of the blessing, he says, the eternal God is your refuge, says Moses. And underneath are the everlasting arms. He will drive out your enemy before you, saying, destroy him. So Israel will live in safety alone. Jacob's spring is secure in a land of grain and new wine, where the heavens drop dew. Blessed are you, O Israel. Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord? He is your shield and helper, and your glorious sword. Your enemies will cower before you, and you will trample down their high places. That's the end of the blessing. And then in chapter 34, a short chapter, it says, then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, the Mount Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him all the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land I promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died. There in Moab, as the Lord had said, he buried him. In Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, until the time of weeping and mourning was over. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all these miraculous signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and all his officials, and to his whole land, for no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. So that's the end. Who wrote that? Who wrote the death of Moses? Well, it wasn't Moses. Who talked about the visions God gave him atop Mount Nebo? It wasn't Moses. Maybe he did write about it. It says, no man knows where he was buried. Did Joshua accompany him when he went up Mount Nebo? Or did he have servants that took his scrolls back? Did he leave the scroll unfinished? Did he write before he died that, and Moses descended Nebo and God showed him everything and he died? Then did he roll the scroll up and leave it? And Joshua came in and wrote the end and said, and so Moses died and Joshua, son of Nun, took over, and this is this and blah, blah, blah. So Matthew, Professor Bauer says in the chat room, precisely, Matthew, all the stories in the Bible are from other sources long before the Hebrew writings. No, that's not true at all. Now, there are events that are written about in the writings of Moses that I myself have said were plagiarized. They were stories that Moses learned of creation. He learned them when he grew up in the schools of the nobles in Egypt. Why would he not have extrapolated all that information and put it in? But what he did do, he took the story of creation and he changed it. So like Micah Hanks and I were once going to write a book about these comparative times, and to say, well, the Sumerians wrote the about the creation with the Anunnaki and the people that they created, and Enlil and Enki, the gods of the Anunnaki who created humanity. And we have almost the exact telling of the Garden of Eden story, only very different. You have Atrahasis, the king of the humans, comes to his god Enki, also known as Ea, and he pleads to Enki Ea to deliver humans from the bondage to the gods, because we dig their canals, we till their ground for them, we do all this work for them, and we are not free. And so Enki delivers the forbidden knowledge of the gods to Atrahasis, blesses him with that information, and it says, and Atrahasis and the humans win the war against the gods, the Anunnaki, and they are free. And for this, according to the Sumerian story, Enki Ea is banned to the subterranean caverns of the earth to dwell forever, as a banishment from the courts of the Anunnaki by the chief god of the Anunnaki, Enlil. And so, what does this story sound like? It sounds an awful lot like the Edenic story, the Garden of Eden. You've got the story of God creating humans, placing them in a garden, having them till the ground and keep it for him, and that the trickster character, the Elohim character, Nakash, comes along in the Garden of Eden. He's not called Satan or the devil for another 1,000 years, by the way, but in the writings of Moses, he is the one of the Elohim who comes and tempts Eve. And I believe that there was a dual seed that was created in the garden. And if you were to take this story literally, but what happens is that the god that comes down, and instead of Enki with Atrahasis delivering him the forbidden knowledge so they can free themselves from God, you've got a character that later becomes known as Satan or Lucifer or the devil, who delivers information to Adam and Eve, and they break away from God. But that's the great sin in the fall of man. So you've got two different versions of this account. And did Moses? I think this is where you have some of the writings that are not original to the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew text, but certainly the stories that you find of the characters in those texts are original. Some of the stories, like creation itself, is taken and it's given a different version. Micah Hanks and I had postulated that perhaps the Genesis story is a version of a prototype, that prior to the Genesis story of Moses, prior to the Anunnaki story of the Sumerians, there is some prototype that lies beneath that story. And these are all these different versions. That's why you had different versions of the flood story with different cultures. So they all had their stories stemming from a common event that they placed their cultural references into. So that's where I think, Professor, you're right on the mark. Read Mauro Biglino and Joseph Atwill's work. They use original source material where the Bible is rewritten. I know you've asked me 10 times now to read their work. I haven't had time since we started talking about it. But they use original source material where the Bible was rewritten by dozens of people over hundreds of years. Well, I would like to see what they're making reference to. So I will have to look at their work and see, well, what is it that they are talking about where the Bible was rewritten by dozens of different people over hundreds of years? Are they talking about New Testament stuff? Are they talking about Old Testament stuff? Are they talking about the book of Enoch, which does not appear in the canon of Scripture, but appears in the apocryphal books? It's considered a pseudepigraphal book, as a matter of fact. Yet the book of Enoch dates back a lot farther than the time it's being attributed to. We also find that, yes, the Old Testament was rewritten in the form of the Septuagint. Septuagint was written, we talked about this last time, was written in about the 400s BCE. When the 72 rabbis went to Ptolemy II, asked permission to go to the Library of Alexandria to reconstruct the Hebrew scriptures from texts that would have been in the Library of Alexandria. So what we have today pretty much matches the Septuagint. It is the Septuagint, our Old Testament. And so all these changes that they're talking about in their book must have something to do with changes that took place before the Septuagint was written. And the Septuagint was the product of course, oral tradition for 2,000 years, as well, and religious oral tradition, not just telephone telling a story over and over again and everything changes. There are textual criticisms where you can go through and you can get texts that go back, even in the New Testament, as early as within 100 years of the time of Jesus, and very little textual change from today in the New Testament. There are textual changes. There's some places where there are things completely omitted from the New Testament, chapters that don't appear, chapters that appear that weren't in the texts that go back to the 1st century AD. So whose text is correct? So yes, there's a lot of that. I've read a lot about textual criticism. I took textual criticism courses when I was in seminary. So I've heard a lot of this stuff. I'd like to see what they have to say. I don't hang my hat on the research of just two guys that say our research indicates this, when there are hundreds of other people researching that might disagree with them or have a different take on the same thing. So it's interesting. I happen to believe, and belief is a word that's used to say I believe this. I don't know if it's necessarily by faith, but I believe Moses was a real guy, and Moses penned the first 5 books of the Bible, and Moses was the leader of his people, leader of a people that he led out of a bondage, more or less, situation in Egypt. I don't know that they were all slapped in chains and whipped every day. I believe, like we have learned, that a lot of the workers, the builders of the pyramids and so on, there's a whole city they've uncovered in the last 20, 30 years adjacent to the Great Pyramid of Egypt in Giza. And that city would have housed about 20 to 30,000 people. And it shows that there was a constant presence there. These were the people, and it was not slave quarters. These were the people that worked for their Pharaoh. This is what they did. This is what their life was. They built these structures for their pharaohs. And that was the city where they lived. And they were Egyptians, not slaves. Let's see, I got to put this on to read some of these. Let's see. If you don't look at it, you don't know what you're missing. Well, that's true. That's like anything else. I could give you 100 books to read that would probably controvert what these two guys have to say, but you aren't going to know what it says unless you take the time to read it. And yeah, I don't know what they say, what exactly they say. I have an idea of what they're talking about because I've read a whole lot of stuff very similar, and that wraps around the kind of things that they do. Do you take King James and the Gang's translation compilation of the works that make up the Bible today? Do I take it in what? I take it and say that was a 1611 AD version of the Bible. A lot of it's political. But when I went to seminary, like the passage I read tonight, I didn't even read out of the King James. I read out of the New International Version, which goes back to texts that exist before the original source texts that they used to write the King James Bible. They've gone back to other source points, older source points. They followed the chain of edits, if you will. I brought up the word baptize last time we talked about this, how that was a transliterated word in the King James Bible. Why? Because during the time of King James, baptize meant you sprinkle somebody, and that baptism saves the soul. There are so many people in the Catholic Church especially that believe I got to have my baby baptized so my baby doesn't die and go to hell before the age of understanding. Did you know that that concept is nowhere in Scripture? Did you know that the word baptize, as we use it in English, to indicate sprinkling on the forehead or so on, that there is no concept like that in the New Testament? Do you know that the original word in the Koine Greek for baptism is baptizo, which means immersion, dipping under the water and back out of the water? Did you know that James, in his book, the book of James in the New Testament, wrote that baptism is not the putting away of the filth of the flesh, but rather an answer of a good conscience toward God once you have accepted life as a Christian? Immersion as a way of showing that you accept, not as a means of accepting or as a means of doing away with the filth of the flesh or sin. So these things have been adulterated over the years. So you go back to the texts, you follow the train of texts, and you get to the text where this text we took that from, oh, that came from this text, and this text says something very different or has a different connotation. In the King James Bible, they use the word baptizo. Rather than the translation of the word, they used the transliteration of the word for politics' sake, because they did not want to defy the church's teaching on baptism. So they used baptizo, the Koine Greek word for immersion, without saying, and Jesus was immersed by John the Baptist in the River Jordan. No, Jesus was baptized, baptizoed, in the river waters of the Jordan by John the Baptist, and all the teachings thereafter in the New Testament. So the King James is faulty in certain respects. In other respects, it's spot on the mark. So you have to study. This is why, if you're a Christian and you believe in the New Testament, you better study it to find out what it says. What did it say before politics came in and changed certain things? So there are sources that you can go to that are very damn close to the original source. And many times you don't find a book, a scroll like this. You know, I am reading the words of James. He wrote these under Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can't find those. Oh, that's their handwriting. No, but you can find texts that were copies of their texts that were written within 50 to 100 years of their day. So this show isn't about textual criticisms, but it is one to say that we can't blanket say that the stories of the Bible are false and the people are false because two guys wrote a book after their research and shows their research that says, well, this is what we believe about this and this is what we believe about that based on this and this source point and this source point. They might be right. And I think there's probably many things they're right about. But I also don't think you can do it's like the whole question now we're not even getting to the meat of what I want to talk about tonight, but I think this is important. The question of what was I thinking? The writings that you have in the New Testament that have been carried over from the Old Testament, some of them, or taken from older texts, I mean, and sources. There's a specific thought I wanted to get across, and I lost myself explaining why I was going to talk about it. It'll come to me. So, all of the writings that we have in the New Testament have been so studied and so researched. There are some things you have to take by faith. There are some things you can say, well, this happened this way. Things that we've doubted, things we've had questions about. It's like, the whole, I've brought this up several times, the whole Pontius Pilate issue, the governor of Judea during the crucifixion of Jesus. That's the only real big moment of fame in the life of Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea under the Roman government. And so many centuries they thought Pilate was a fictional character until, and when they had all these writings, they had early first century Roman historians, not religious historians, that would write and they'd mention Pilate when talking about the Jesus movement. But you didn't have any real extant archaeological evidence that the man ever existed. Why wouldn't the government of Rome have papers, have history written about Pontius Pilate? And it wasn't until 1964, and I brought this up before, just worth mentioning, wasn't until 1964 that they discovered in an old staircase in ruins in what used to be Caesarea Philippi, the Roman capital of Judea, north of Galilee, or I'm sorry, out on the coast of the Mediterranean, they found in a stairway the remnants of old buildings that had been used to build a stairway in the 200s or 300s AD. And one of these stones was a cornerstone with an inscription. The inscription talked about Praefectus Pontius Pilatus dedicates this gymnasium, calling it the Tiberium, and then it was the date, the Roman date, that would have placed it right around 5 or 6 years before the death of Jesus. And so there was a gymnasium that stood there on that site, and the ruins and the stones it was all archaeologically tested, historically tested, so on. The stone matched the stones of this old gymnasium, and there's an inscription of Pontius Pilate dedicating a building in Caesarea Philippi. That stone sits in the Jerusalem Museum today. So the big question, all of a sudden, what happened to the claims that Pontius Pilate was non-existent? He was a fictional character made up in the fictional story of the fictional life of Jesus. Well, now they've got some historical proof that he existed. So that changes everything. Might not change your belief system, might not change their belief system, but it's something that now is hard evidence. It's like the things they're finding in the recent few years in little towns that were hill fort towns in Judea from the time of David. It's got administrative seals that are found from like governmental officials that worked for the house of David, for David the king. They're finding these things, these seals, that they existed. What does it do? Does it prove that all the stories about David are true? No. What it does prove is that David was a real guy and was a king in Israel, when there are many who want to put forward the idea that he was a fictional character. It's like the book that I based my series on David about 4 years ago almost. King David, and the subtitle was The Real Story, the Real Life Story of a Fictional Hero, of an invented hero, I think was what it was. Because there's a lot of evidence that everything you read about David in the Bible is a true account, but it's got to be looked at through the filter of, was this an apologetic about David? Was this a real event that happened? Did David have sons? Yeah. Did his son die? Yeah. Did his son lead a rebellion? Yeah. Did David quell the rebellion? Yes. But he's made to look clean. His hands are clean in it. Yet the real history was probably more likely he subdued it and said, my son needs to die. He was as ruthless as any other Middle Eastern monarch of his day. So there are things like this, stories like this, that exist. It does not undo the existence or the veracity of the existence of the person or the event, but it puts it in a different spin. I've heard the Exodus took place as the eruption of Mount of Santorini, and that sent shock waves, and there were all around the world, and that the parting of the Red Sea was a result of that, and so on. Well, the time is wrong, is the problem, because you can date the eruption of Santorini to the times of its recorded history. You can date it to recorded leaders of countries who had nothing to do with the Exodus. They do not fit the time period. So this is what I wanted to bring up tonight. And we'll only now, because I've been talking about all this stuff, we're just going to hint at this tonight. We got about 12 minutes left, 13 minutes. Let's use them wisely here, because I'm talking about the Exodus. Can the Exodus be historically dated? There are different dates that have been offered up. We talked about the name of the Pharaoh and why that was omitted. And we really came up with the conclusion that, and this is where we left off, that this was a practice of the day. A practice of the day to leave off the names of the kings. Until later, they started adding them in again. So this is all under this main header that I started 3 episodes ago, that there are 3 introductory background matters that we have to deal with. And the first was the omission of the Exodus Pharaoh's name from the account. Now we're on to the second one, the biblical chronology, precisely dating the Exodus. Can it be done with the information that we have? So before proceeding, the exact date of the Exodus has to be established. We have to know when this took place. Now, is it important for your daily life? Is it important for how you do your job? Is it important for how you raise your family? Is it an important issue to you? Maybe you're not Jewish or Christian at all. And you're like, why is that important to me? It doesn't have to be. It's not important. It's a topic that I enjoy, and it's a topic that so many people believe in, that I think it's worthy of taking a look and saying, did this thing actually take place, and when? Who was the Pharaoh? Did he actually exist, and when? So we've talked about the name of the Pharaoh and why I believe he was Amenhotep II, but that's predicated on the fact that we have to establish when this took place, because Amenhotep II ruled at a specific time in history. He has specific dates to his reign. And so now, let's, I didn't know if that was for me. So now, let's look at the biblical chronology. The central text for this whole crucial historical event, as I've mentioned already, we talked about in the show already, 1 Kings 6:1. It connects the Exodus to later Israelite history by noting that Solomon the king began constructing the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple in the 480th year after the Exodus, signifying that there was an elapsed time of 479 plus years. And all but the minimalists agree that the counting of the 479 plus years should begin with May of 967 or 966 BCE as the date of the construction of Temple 1 in Jerusalem, which there is so much evidence that that temple existed beneath what is now the Mosque of Omar, the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. That temple existed and Solomon built it. It was torn down. It was rebuilt by Nehemiah. It was torn down. It was rebuilt by King Herod in the very early BCE dates, the first 10 years. And then it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and it was gone forever. But and then the Dome of the Rock, the platform the Dome of the Rock sits on, is the platform of the temple of Herod the Great. And underneath that is all sorts of information. You aren't allowed to dig beneath the Dome of the Rock. Why? Because it's considered sacred to Islam. And I think also because Islam knows that the temple was there. They don't want to give any claims to Israel. So let's continue on. The 479 plus years began in 1446 or 1445 BC, either of which can be substantiated by the biblical text, and it's harmonized with the conclusions drawn from everything I'm going to be presenting you about these dates, which we won't get through the whole thing tonight on the dating, but we're going to start at it. Now, there's a big case to be built for the 1446 BC date of the Exodus, which I adhere to, and I believe was right. And I believe it is right. There's a compelling argument for choosing 1446 BC, and it's that the Jubilee cycles agree with this date exactly. The year of Jubilee in Jewish history, every 7 years or every 49 years. Can't remember what it was. 7 years. And they're completely independent of the 479 plus years of 1 Kings 6:1. The Jubilee dates are precise only if the priests began counting years when they entered the land in 1406 BC. That's Leviticus 25, 2 through 10. The Talmud lists 17 cycles from Israel's entry into the land of Canaan until the last Jubilee in 574 BC, which is 14 years after Jerusalem's destruction by using the Tishri calendar, a statement also found in chapter 11 of the Seder Olam, which predates the Talmud. So consequently, 1446 BC is preferred over 1445 BC. So that's some interesting, it starts to get very detailed. I have all kinds of notes here about talking about the exact month and day of the Exodus. It can be deduced. As God both established for Israel a lunar calendar that began with the month of Nisan, originally Abib, you find that in Exodus 13, and precisely predicted the day of the Exodus as 14 Nisan. You'll find that in Exodus 12:6. So the month of Nisan, the 14th day. And the new moon that began the month of Nisan in 1446 reportedly occurred at 21:42 for the hour. The hour 21, which is what? Is that 10 o'clock? 10:42 Universal Time. On Wednesday, the 8th of April. And you can go to web pages and you can look up all this stuff, a NASA page and all of that to figure and configure the date of the Exodus. Yes, Matthew, it's solar and lunar. So, assuming there were no significant variations in the Earth's rotation, apart from the roughly 25 seconds per century that NASA allows for the tidal retardation of the Earth's rotational velocity, But there's two variables that have to be factored into this equation. One, the date used to mark the new moon varies slightly according to the point of observation. In the eastern Nile Delta, which is where the land of Goshen would have been, where the slaves lived, the Egyptian royal city of Memphis was located there. The time is 2.1 hours ahead of longitude 0 at the Greenwich Meridian. So the new moon should have been observable in Egypt at 2142, which is, again, what is that, 1042? Plus 2.1 hours, equaling 2348 hours or 11:48 p.m. Now, since 11:48 was after sunset on the 8th of April, the sunset was the standard time for Egypt's priests to declare a new moon upon observing the moon's crescent. They would not have declared a new month that night. Instead, they would have waited until the next night, which for now can be assumed to be 9th of April. However, the Earth's rotation velocity has varied on two prior occasions, beyond the variable of 25 seconds per century, stopped until the nation took vengeance on their enemies, an event that transpired for about a full day, according to Joshua, a miraculous act. Strictly speaking, the Earth and not the sun stood still. And of necessity, the moon's relative proximity to the Earth did not vary. Now, of course, we have to say, was that mythological? Did God miraculously do that and life on Earth did not end because the Earth stopped rotating? Don't know. So strictly speaking, the Earth and not the sun stood still. And the proximity of the moon to the Earth did not vary, so the moon stopped moving as well. The second occasion was during the days of Hezekiah, 703 BC, when the shadow went back 10 steps on the dial. Find that in 2 Kings 20, verse 10. A terrestrial phenomenon that represents the retrograde motion of the Earth. So since the length of these 10 steps and the position of the sun at the time are unknown, a variation of about one full day, meaning that the first day of Nisan in Egypt actually fell on Friday, the 10th of April. So from here, the biblical text can extrapolate the Exodus date. So the Lord said, and that's if you're worried about the day and the time of day it took place. So you've got to have then the case for dating the Exodus to the late date of the Exodus, which is 1267 BC, during the reign of Ramses II. About 100 and, well, actually from 1446 to 1267 is almost 200 years. So some prefer dating the Exodus to 1267 BC, interpreting the 480th figuratively. So actually dating the period of the oppression and the Exodus to the 15th century BC has largely been replaced in favor of a 13th century date, say some of the scholars. One reason for this surge is an alleged superior correspondence with the historical and the archaeological record. So since, one, the earliest extra-biblical attestation to Israel's presence in Canaan is the Merneptah Stele that was erected about 1219 BCE, and two, that no evidence of the Israelites in Canaan from 1400 to 1200 BC even exists. However, late Exodus proponents should remember that there is also an invisibility of the Israelites in the archaeology of Canaan between 1200 and 1000 BC. So the extension of their invisibility by 2 more centuries should create no additional burden. So Millard notes, he's one of the scholars, that by analogy that the Amorites are absent from the archaeology of Babylonia, as only the texts attest to their presence. Yet no scholar doubts their impact on Mesopotamia's history in the early 2nd millennium BC. They only appeared in Babylonian texts, but there's no other historical information about them. You're going to have to go, please, because I'm doing a show. Thank you. Nope. You can wait till I'm done.
Well, I need to know
You
now.
can wait until I am done.
with radio, like we have said 3 million times before tonight. There you go, folks. Be a parent. It's fun. It helps you practice your yelling mode. Now a second reason for this surge into 1267 is that Ramses, the store city of Ramses, Pi Ramses it's known as, that the Israelites built according to Exodus 1:11, is usually identified with Pi Ramses, which flourished from around 1270 to 1100. The passage actually says, and the Israelites built the treasure cities of Pi Ramses, which are attributed to Ramses II, who lived in the 1200s. And it was comparable to the largest cities that existed in the day, but was built built only during the reign of Ramses II. So there's a rebuttal that Ramses was used of the land to which the patriarchs traveled several centuries earlier, when no ruler bore the name Ramses, suggesting that references may be a divinely overseen updating of an earlier place name. Ramses was not necessarily the name of the king that they're referring to. So whether or not Exodus 1:11 is anachronistic, there's no guarantee that Pi Ramses is biblical Ramses. Skolnick warns that the truth is that there are very few sites indeed that yield the kind of evidence required to make the site identifications that we, especially we who are openly interested in religion, yearn to make. Now, the interesting thing is that, and we've only got a minute left before we've got to zap out of the radio show, but the city beneath Pi Ramses is the city of Avaris. And Avaris is the city that we believe that Joseph ruled from, that the Israelites settled in, that became the slave city. And that Ramses II, just like with the Abydos lintel, and the Pharaoh erased the old inscription and placed his own, this is what Ramses did with Avaris. He erased its existence as a former city and placed his own name on it, Pi Ramses. So, folks, we got to get out of here for tonight. We'll pick up this whole thing on the dating system in a little bit, the next show that we do on this. So for now, radio audience, we got to get out of here. Stay over for the Captain's Cabin at the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. Live long and prosper.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here.
Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is the Captain's Cabin. Arr, how y'all doing? Swab me decks. And go below decks and swab them. So welcome to the show. I've got a couple of graphics up in here I was going to show during the show, but I'll show you now. I couldn't find all the pages, but if you, the book that John Ward and I wrote, The Exodus Reality, we had a couple of color sections in the book where we showed who we believed that were based on who we believed the Pharaoh of the Exodus was. And John's, of course, he thought, or not the Pharaoh, I'm sorry, who Moses was. And he believed that Moses was an archetype and that Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, Grand Vizier, underneath, I can't remember which Pharaoh it was, Amenhotep III, I believe it was, that he was a Moses archetype that led people out of a destroyed Thebes, which is now Luxor. And so his was based on this character. And mine, of course, was I had, I believe, Senenmut, the bust that's back there behind me, and was the Moses character. And I based mine on Hatshepsut. And this is a picture I took of Hatshepsut's temple while we were going up into the ridge of the Theban mountains up above her temple in Luxor. And that's one of her statues. You can see some of the pigment is still adhered to the statue. The red crown with the white gourd, whatever that was, gourd-shaped piece. So, yes, he is, Matthew. Amenhotep III was the father of Amenhotep IV, who was Akhenaten. So, there, I was going to show those while we were at it. And I have a whole bunch of them, and I couldn't find where I have stored those on my discs, so I couldn't bring them up. Then I thought of doing a slideshow tonight just for the fun of it, so we could go through all the slides from this area. We'll maybe do that next time. So anyway, I believe the whole dating system is an important thing to understand when dating the Exodus. Now, by the way, I have a fairly general rule. If I have under 10 people in the chat room for the Captain's Cabin, I will move it out pretty quick and we'll call it a night. So there were only 9 when I came in, people watching, so that were watching the radio show. So I thought we probably won't have much of a Captain's Cabin tonight. We'll see what happens. Now we've jumped to 13, which, for a chat room, that's average. It's okay. Just so you know, we aren't only broadcasting to 13 people. We have quite a high number of people that listen to the show on the radio station and that watch the show but don't come in to the chat room. You're welcome to come in if you want. Just so those of you who are here don't think, well, are we only broadcasting to 9 people? There's a whole lot more out there, folks. So, and we also do these in their archives. So they get watched after the fact as well. So I appreciate your presence here. So there we are. I don't see a lot of activity. Let's see. Oh, cue Professor Bauer bursting into captain's cabin. JP, you should come in too. Anybody who wants to talk about these things, welcome in the captain's cabin. Of course, we're open to talk about lots of different things. I like to try to keep the conversation in the cabin as much toward the topic of the show as possible. That doesn't mean we can't drift into other things like we do all the time anyway. But you're all welcome here if you want to call in. The link to call in is, of course, below in the description of the show. Let me copy it, and I'll also paste that into the chat room. If you want to call in and talk about these things, there it is. Bada boom. So we're ready to roll. I want to let you know too, folks. I finally, after all the egging on of my daughters, my older daughters who run a business and use TikTok to go onto TikTok and to do something, Rainey persuaded me to do it. And so about 3 weeks ago, I started a TikTok. And all I'm doing over there on TikTok is I'm doing daily single card readings. Reading a card and saying, here's your card of the day. So go on over to TikTok. If you have a TikTok account, even if you don't, I think you can go over and sign up for one. Probably. I want to go here and I'll grab the it's Mr. Scotty Roberts. Yeah, just like some of my other stuff. Go to tiktok.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Mr. all spelled out. Let me paste it in here for you. So if you haven't already, go on over there. You can see the daily cards. Now, can a single card that we read for the day apply to everyone? Not in detail. Tarot is pretty general until you start putting all the cards together in a flow, in a reading. Then they will all modify each other. You can get specific information and specific. Oh, Kelly Bell did it. She came over. I saw you over there, Kelly Bell. Yeah, well, because we want to see the captain's cabin go off the rails, says JP. Well, there you go. I think that's why some people just come into the captain's cabin to see how far off the rails we can go. So, tarot, you can read a card and it can apply to a lot of people. They're pretty general. They're pretty vague in their descriptions, really, when you think about it. Kelly Bell. But when you start stacking them together in a flow of cards, it creates a logical progression. And I believe that there is something spiritual that governs that for an individual. Not everything has to be explained by the nuts and bolts of science. There are some veils I think we cannot pierce. We simply do not know and do not understand. A spiritual element to something does not mean it is wrong or it's fake or it's tawdry or any kind of descriptor you want to put to it. It just means it's not definable by science. So is there something that guides the cards? After 38 years of reading tarot cards, I would say yes, there is. Otherwise, I wouldn't read them. Hey, Mark Eddy, good to see you. JP says, I honestly don't really know enough to effectively contribute to this topic. Which topic? The Exodus or tarot? Talking about historicity of things. So, there you go. Well, you don't have to. It's okay. So, the date of the Exodus, you don't have to be studied on the date of the Exodus. Maybe know a little bit about how we determine what is an historical event versus what is a fictional event. When does archaeology come into play? When does anthropology come into play? When does, those things affect history? So there's that factor. So yeah, we'll probably wrap it pretty tightly close tonight. And we'll give you all a little bit of a break. And we'll move out of doing the captain's cabin tonight, and which is okay. We all have other things we can do, for certain, and that's okay. And we'll pick it up next time. There are some shows that Captain's Cabin can go pretty late sometimes if you haven't been here for a while enjoying it. So nobody's got anything they want to contribute. I think we're gonna wrap this up then. We'll make it a short Captain's Cabin tonight. So you've already heard me talking for an hour and 15 minutes. So it's time for me. I can shut up and let you all get an early night. And I appreciate the fact, though, that you'd be here, that you'd give me your time, and that you're always here. Seems we have a great group of people that likes to keep coming back, and I'm glad you're here. And that's all I got. So you have a good weekend, starting later tonight, frankly, and spilling over into Saturday. We'll be back here on Sunday morning, and or will we? There's something coming up where I won't be here on a Sunday morning, and I can't think of what it is. Oh, I think maybe the Sunday morning, the 25th, I am going up to Duluth to participate in Andy Dabb's book release party for his new book, From Turmoil to Triumph. And I'll give you more information on that as it comes closer. And if you're around, Sarah Soderlin will be there too, by the way. She's going to be shooting pictures. I'm going to be shooting some video. And we're going to be enjoying the book release party of Andy's at one of the stores up there, Wausau's or something like that. I'll come up with it. I'll show you the graphic for that. So everybody, thank you for being here. Even though we've had a couple of people coming in late, we're going to call a short Captain's Cabin tonight, since the show has been going for an hour and 15 minutes now. And we started off with not a lot of attendance for the Captain's Cabin, and I usually just don't put it out there at that point. Not for any other dumb reason other than people aren't here. They've got other things to do, so we'll move on. So there you go. That's all I got. So for now, I'm going to say thanks for being here. Everybody, will see you again Sunday. Live long and prosper.